All right, guys, it's time. Here. This is a really, really good scripture story for y'all, but it's one you have to kind of pay attention to because there's subtleties, okay? A few of us will get it. Here we go. You ready? All right.
Okay, 3 words, 3 syllables. First word, hook. Hook. Last, hook. Horns. Hook. Horns. Hook. Paper.
All right. There's actually scripture behind it. Here we go. Let's have Christine, you read this to us. Very good. So that's a good lesson, right? So this actually dovetails with what we did last time. You remember last time it was about rumors and lying, right? It builds on that. What comes out of our mouth is what hurts us. It's not what goes in. And so the message there is that, like, in the Old Testament or in ancient times, you weren't allowed to eat certain things because that would defile you. So he's saying it's not what goes in, it's what comes out. So what's in your heart is expressed through your voice. And so that's what hurts you. Cool deal, guys? All right, Christine, who's praying for us today? All right, Allie's got it. Full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thanks, Allie. All right, so we got this stuff here, okay? So we're going to go over this word, line by line, make sure it's all understood, okay? This is all the stuff we learned last time, by the way, Corbin. There's a lot of stuff behind all this. But, all right. So it says here that incomes have increased by 1,000, okay, and spending has increased by 750. So we're given in the opening part here, we're given the change in income and the change in consumption, right? And then it's hidden in there, but we also have the change in savings, correct? All right, so what's our change in savings? 250, okay? So we got our 250. If we divide by our change in income, that gives us what? And that's our MPS, right? Yes. So 0.25, good. Okay? So once we have that, what's our expenditure multiplier? Whoa. It's 4. Who's saying 4? Okay, who's saying something else? Let's make sure we get this. It is 4 because the ME is 1 divided by our MPS. Okay? Everybody got that? Did y'all find that homework difficult? Filling out the chart and then answering the questions? I'm sorry. It was tricky. All right, tax multiplier. 3. Whoops, I already have it. All right. And this is simply the ME that you already calculated minus 1. Okay? It also is found by taking the MPC and dividing by your MPS. Okay? So that's where it comes from. Yes, ma'am. Well, the savings is the 250. Okay? The consumption, the spending part is 750. Okay? You got that? Did you do 1 over 750? Or 1 over 0.75? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so here's how Allie did it. She did do this, 750 over 1,000 to get her MPC. And then if you subtract that from 1, you get the 0.25 for the MPS. Okay? All right, so now this is the part where, Alex, I bet you this is the part where you got tricked up on the homework. You might, well, I don't know, maybe you screwed it up somehow, but the point is that that's where most people start getting it kind of confused, okay? So if spending increases by 100, how much does GDP increase by? 400, okay? So that's why this thing's called a multiplier. It says that whatever spending takes place in the economy, because of people's savings and their spending patterns, then GDP will really increase by 400. Yeah, we just multiplied this 100 by this 4. Okay? Now instead, we're going to have taxes decreased by 100. And so what happens there? 300. It's increased. All right. All right, so I don't have to answer the question? I think I should answer it anyway, okay? So y'all should let me do that, because there's people up here that can't hear all the whispering. So if taxes are decreased, it just goes to our theory, okay? Whenever taxes go down, it gives us more money, we spend it, right? So that means aggregate demand has to shift to the right whenever taxes are decreased. So that's why this has to be increased. Does that make sense, guys? Well, that's actually super simple, okay? So if you're talking about spending, you got to use the expenditure multiplier. Okay, expenditure has spending in it, or at least the sound, okay? And then the tax multiplier is talking about taxes. So whenever taxes are the subject, you're going to use the tax multiplier. Okay? All right, cool. So y'all good? Pretty exciting? All right. So today, we're going to, and I think we already know a lot of this, but today you're going to be able to diagnose problems in the economy. You're going to prescribe a solution. You're going to demonstrate how your solution could work in theory. But then you're also going to recognize that there are complications. Okay, so we're going to talk about several complications that maybe lessen the effect of this multiplier that we've calculated. Okay? Y'all cool with that? All right, well, that's okay. There are 3 KIA assignments. Okay, you've got one on fiscal policy, which is what we're doing today. Then you've got one on complications to fiscal policy, which will include the loanable funds market, which we're going to learn about today. And then we got one that's fairly quick and easy called automatic stabilizers. Okay? And then next class, which is Thursday, we're going to take a major quiz. And so I need to make sure y'all understand what to expect on a major quiz. Okay? You need to be able to draw a graph for the overall economy, which means you're going to use the ADAS graph. So if you're given information that says the economy's in a recession, then you need to be able to draw a recession on that graph. Or if it's dealing with inflation, you need to be able to draw inflation. If you're given actual data so that you'll know how big the recession is, okay, you'll need to plot those points on your graph. Then you're going to come up with solutions to the recession or inflation, okay, and you're going to demonstrate how your solution could solve the problem. But then, because we're learning about these complications to fiscal policy, you're also going to need to be able to draw a loanable funds market graph, which we're going to learn about today, loanable funds. And you're going to have to go back in your memory and be able to draw the foreign exchange market graphs. There we go. All right. So guys, we're kind of wrapping everything together today. Okay, we've gotten a lot of the theory behind the multiplier. The multiplier comes from Keynes. Okay. And so we've got basically fiscal policy. Okay, fiscal policy has been practiced by every president since, I guess, FDR. Okay, actually since what's his name, Coolidge. Okay. All right. So the whole goal behind all of this is just to even out the business cycle. Okay, the business cycle has its ups and downs, right? So Keynes theorized that if we use the government to kind of spend money when times are tough, then the recession would be much smaller, okay, less deep. And then he also said that when times are really, really good, we should decrease government spending. That's the part that gets lost, okay? We have never decreased government spending, so that's the part that kind of gets screwed up. But basically his theory was that we would just kind of make this more of a rolling hill instead of ups and downs that are really, really extreme. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So we're basically asking these questions, okay? And these aren't questions we have to write down and answer. It's just telling you why it is we're learning about fiscal policy, okay? Number one, can the government use spending and tax policies to help the economy, okay? What policies are going to help fight inflation? I think we already know that one. Raise taxes or reduce spending. Okay? And what are the roles of government intervention? Okay, we've looked at the classical economists, we looked at the Keynesian economists. They still fight today. Okay, you see the fights in Congress today. Okay, some want more spending, some want less spending. Okay, So a little bit of background. Up until 1915, the federal government was actually fairly small. Okay? They didn't collect a lot in taxes, and they didn't spend a whole lot of money. The reason they didn't is because they didn't have the power to collect a lot of taxes. Okay? So in 1902, as an example, it employed fewer than 350,000 people, and the entire federal government spent about $650 million. Okay? And you guess what it is today? Well, the dollars is trillions, obviously, but the employment is tenfold at least. Oh, 20-fold, sorry. So today it employs over 6 million people and spends more than $3.5 trillion. Huh? Uh-huh. Every year. Okay. Here's where they get their money, though. So all this kind of got its impetus with the passage of the 16th Amendment. Yeah. So the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution extended the power to the government to tax incomes. Okay? And so today the federal government collects around $2.5 trillion a year in tax revenues. You got it. That's the big problem. Okay? Now that wouldn't be a problem if we only did that during times of recession, but then in good times we would have surpluses. It would all balance out. Okay? Kind of like our own personal lives. You know, when times are tough, we do borrow money. We'll put money on a credit, or we'll put groceries on a credit card if we have to. But then when times are good, we pay it all off. Okay? The government just doesn't do that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's why it's so high. So and by the way, a lot of that is because we have been in a really bad economic, downturn. Well, it just happens all by itself. I'm going to show you in a little while what we have. It's gone from $1 trillion a year deficit to maybe $600 billion a year, but it's projected that that's going to go up even more here in the next couple of years. Okay, are we good? All right, cool. So let's review a little bit. Okay, this is what most people would accept as a good stimulus type spending. Okay, something that helps the infrastructure. So here we have basically you're going to see a water bridge. Have y'all ever seen these? You have? It's pretty cool. Okay, so what's the point of it? The point is to increase commerce. Okay, so you have two rivers in Germany, right? If you want to go from one river to another, you would go down river to the ocean, sail across the ocean, and then go up the other river, right? Well, this is just a connector, kind of like our high five. And so it would connect these two rivers inland so that you don't have to spend all that time going down and then back up. Okay, that's kind of cool. Anyway, this thing cost 500 million euros. Okay, so using our multiplier again, if the MPC is 0.75, what impact would this have on real GDP in Germany? Can y'all calculate that real fast? Y'all should be able to do this in your head at some point. Anybody? 2 billion. You got it, buddy. Nickel to you. How'd you do that? So you figured out the expenditure multiplier is 4, right? Bottom line. And then 4 times 500 is 2,000. So 2,000 million is really 2 billion. That's exactly what you said. Good job. Cool? It's not too bad. All right, here's another one. This one's kind of cool. So this is a bridge that connects France with Spain. Okay, I don't know a lot. I've never been here, so I don't know exactly about it, but I know that it's a really big valley. And they created this bridge, so it's kind of cool. Yeah. So it costs $500 million. So if the MPC is 0.8, what would be the impact on real GDP in France? 2.5 billion. Good. So now the expenditure multiplier is 5. So 5 times 500 would be 2.5 billion. Y'all were quick. That's good. All right. So now, hey, that didn't save. Oh well. I took this political cartoon, but I changed it from Democrats, and it's supposed to say government, because in our government, our last stimulus wasn't quite like, building a lot of infrastructure. Instead, people criticize it. So here's an example. So when you have $1 trillion being spent, and you got 536 people trying to decide how it gets spent, you get stuff like this. So this is a real thing. that came from the stimulus from 2009. They really did spend $32,000 on this brochure. It was called Heroin for Dummies. Anyway, if our MPC is 0.5, how much would this increase GDP by? 64,000. Who said that? Good job, Megan. Oh, wait a minute. Who did the last one? I forgot. I didn't. Dang it. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, work it out. You bet. So we've got 0.5 is the MPC. That means that the MPS is also 0.5. Okay. So we got 1 over 0.5 equals 2. So the expenditure multiplier is 2, meaning 2 times this 32,000 is how much GDP would be increased by, so 64,000. Cool? Okay. Doesn't matter what the stimulus is, if they're spending and something's being purchased, GDP is going to go up. So how about this example?
Financière mondiale nous a bien frappé. Mais de l'aide nous arrive enfin. Le Parlement a approuvé un programme de stimulant économique qui permettra de remettre un accord 47 entre les mains de chaque citoyen congolais. Les législateurs ont conçu le programme de stimulant afin de créer des emplois dans les secteurs de l'économie les plus dynamiques, les contrats d'assassinat, l'enlèvement et le banditisme sur l'autoroute.
Étudier les fibres d'un destin commun, mais aussi sommer pour tisser les trames prometteuses de l'avenir.
D'habitude, ils ont tellement peur des petits yabots avec leur autodéfense.
Les premiers fusils d'assaut ont été envoyés par la poste plus tôt dans la semaine.
Enfin, le gouvernement fait quelque chose pour aider les petits
Les
cœurs.
économistes ont célébré ce projet.
S'occuper également des assassins et qui ont tué des hommes et des femmes et des enfants.
So did y'all figure it out? If the MPC is 0.8 and they spend $50,000 on this program, how much does the Congolese GDP increase by? Who said that? Good job. Okay. It's not even, it's just cheap now. Okay, do you want Megan to explain how she got 250,000? Why don't you tell them how you did it so quickly, though? So 5 times 50,000. But how'd you do it so quickly? Okay. It's good. All right, so here's how it all works, okay? The whole idea behind this. Now, there's a couple of things that have to be, like, perfect for this to happen, okay? Number one, you have to assume that this aggregate supply curve is indeed flat, okay? Because for the multiplier to really be as much as we suggest the multiplier would be, then you've got to be increasing GDP along a flat curve, okay? So we'll just assume that. We may not draw it like that, but we're assuming that to maximize the potential of the multiplier, we have a flat or horizontal aggregate supply curve. All right, so here we have this is a recession. Everybody recognize that? Since the long-run aggregate supply curve is here and AD is over there, then we're definitely not producing to our potential output, so that's a recession. So to fix that, we're going to increase government spending, okay? When we increase government spending, since that's a component of the aggregate demand curve, aggregate demand will increase. When it increases, that means it shifts to the right, okay? When it shifts to the right, we've just increased income, we've increased employment, okay? We've increased GDP. Price level's also gone up a little bit. Everything's cool. The other way you can do it, though, let's say you don't want to increase government spending. Instead, you'd like to reduce taxes. Okay, so you can reduce taxes. The reason that works is because it puts more money in our pockets. So that's an increase in disposable income. When disposable income goes up, we now have more ability to consume. So consumption's going to increase. When consumption increases, that too is a component of the aggregate demand curve. So we're going to shift it to the right, and it continues on exactly like spending. Cool? All right, so again, we're assuming a horizontal aggregate supply curve, but here's some other things. In order for the multiplier to really work, you also have to ignore the supply and the demand for loans, because when the government spends more money, they have to borrow it. And when they borrow it, it increases interest rates. So we're going to explain how that works in a second. But the increased government spending will lead to an increase in demand for loanable funds. Okay? When loanable funds increase in demand, that's what raises interest rates. Same thing when they reduce taxes. Okay? reduced taxes can also lead to deficits, which have to be borrowed. And when they borrow that money, it's going to increase interest rates. All right, y'all cool with that? Because I'm going to show you how this works. As long as we're okay with the mechanics, let's say we're going to look at this. Why do real interest rates rise when spending is increased? Okay? So we have to understand the loanable funds market. Okay? All this is a supply and a demand for what we call loanable funds. Okay? The price of these loanable funds is the real interest rate. So far so good, guys? This is just the money that is available to be loaned out. So where's the money come from? Banks. And where do banks get the money? Us. Okay? So I like to refer to the supply curve as savers. People who save their money make up the supply. Okay? They save it with lenders. So the lenders make up the supply curve. Where do they get those funds? They get it from people who save their money. Okay? Real interest rate, yes. And that's very important. It has to be real interest rate. Okay? Yes, ma'am? The quantity of loanable funds. Okay, Addison? Well, the lenders get their money from the savers. And the reason I say savers is because it reminds us that the supply, that also starts with S, comes from savers. And that could be important. Okay? Then you've got the D. This is the demand. This becomes D for debtors. Okay? But we're not going to really refer to them as debtors. We're going to call them borrowers. Okay? Well, I don't know. It's usually referred to in the literature as borrowers. So I just use debtors because it reminds us that D and D, it's just easier to remember. No. It's just not used. All right, are y'all cool? So really, the way you'll see this, you'll really see lenders and borrowers, okay? I just throw in the savers and the debtors to help you remember supply and demand, okay? So now let's demonstrate what happens if the government wants to increase spending, okay? In other words, they want to make their spending greater than their taxes, okay? If that's how they're going to do it, then they have to go borrow the money, okay? When they borrow money, what happens to the interest rate? Okay? It goes up. So we used to be at this level, so let's just say this was IR1, and this is IR2, higher interest rates. What did we learn about higher interest rates? How does it affect consumption? How does it affect investment? Okay. Those things will go down. So for the multiplier to truly be 5, for example, this could not happen. Okay? Because the reality is that when the government increases their borrowing, interest rates rise. And when interest rates rise, you're going to have less consumption and less investment. So that's one of the complications to fiscal policy. Y'all follow that? Yeah. So the government part will go up, but then the consumption and the investment part could go down. So that's our complication. There's even more. Oh, Alex. Because our theory tells us that when you go to borrow money, and if you're in line behind the government, then what money you borrow is going to cost more to borrow. Okay? And so there's a lot of people that won't be able to do it. Remember the investment demand graph that we looked at? It showed that as interest rates rise, more and more investments become not profitable, and so they're not done. So if there's a return on investment of X and the interest rate is higher than X, you're not going to do it. Okay? Ashley, do you have something? Okay. Y'all cool with this? Okay. Y'all have to be able to draw this and analyze this for your major quiz. Okay? How about I show you? I'm going to demonstrate side by side with another graph to kind of illustrate how it affects investment. Okay? By the way, this is called the crowding out effect. Actually, let me do this. Let me redraw this with the other one. Now that I've shown you basically what it's all about. Okay? And I want y'all to be able to do this. untitled. Yep, everything has to be correct. This graph here that I'm drawing, you don't have to draw. You can use your words to explain this. But this is helpful for those of you that want to see a visual as to why investment will fall, okay? So you have a quantity. This is also real interest rates, okay? So for example, we can state that at the current interest rate, you will have this level of investment. Okay, whatever level that is. Y'all cool with that? Yeah? Okay. So we could even put a number there. Say it's 100. Okay. When the government increases their borrowing, what happened to the interest rate? Okay. And now this is the demand for investment. What happened to the amount of investment? Okay. Yeah, when interest rate rose, the quantity of investment decreased. By the way, this is the demand for investment. That's how we label that graph. Okay, but you can just use your words. Okay, you can say as interest rates rise, more and more investments in capital become less profitable. Therefore, businesses are less inclined to invest when interest rates rise.
So does it not actually change the demand at all?
Yep. Okay. Are you all cool with that? Yeah, this is called crowding out. I'm glad you reminded me to say that.
And that's when quantities.
It's called crowding out because when the government borrows money, it crowds out private investment because the interest rates have risen.
Is the quantity IG?
Yeah, the gross investment.
So just that changes,
Mhm.
not the demand.
No, it just changes the quantity. Okay, Alex.
And like, would we analyze it? Should we say that the demand increases?
The demand for loanable funds increases.
And then the quantity and the rest of it.
Uh-huh. But you can just use words. You don't have to use this graph. You can just say that investments become less profitable with higher interest rates, and so less of it's done. Okay? Yeah. I'm sorry.
I thought it changed the whole demand. The interest rate effect, whenever interest rates were low, gross investments changed the whole demand for
Uh-huh.
gross investments.
Well,
So on this one, they're not changing.
well, here's the thing. This is a component of the aggregate demand curve, right? Okay. So if this increases, just the quantity, that means this curve is going to increase. Okay? So here, the interest rate causes a change in quantity, but that quantity change will change the whole AD curve. Okay? All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we okay so far? Oh, wait a minute, more? Addison? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's more, though. If there's less investment in capital, what happens to our potential for future growth? It decreases. Okay? So that's why at the beginning of this whole thing, I talked about how the Keynesian solution was a short-run solution, but it didn't really help in the long run. And the long run is exhibited here. When there's less investment, there's less future potential growth. Okay? Now let's talk about exports real fast. Okay? If there is higher interest rates, okay, let's say this is the 4x for the dollar. I'm not comparing it to anything necessarily, so I'm just going to put the price of the dollar. Okay? Higher interest rates lead to what on this graph? Higher demand. Okay? No, that's price over dollar, just the price of the dollar. Because remember when we learned this? Financial investors are seeking the higher returns on their financial investments. So the higher interest rates in the United States are going to cause foreigners to demand U.S. currency so they can put it in U.S. banks.
Does it depend on your perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't really. I mean, if interest rates are higher in the U.S., demand for the dollar goes up.
But if I'm someone who has to borrow money, and I'm not going to want a high interest rate, but if I'm saving money in a bank, then I am going to want a high interest rate. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's why we're talking about financial investors. They're earning the interest. Okay? Real investors, businesses, are paying the interest. Okay? Addison. Everybody's. You just have to go back to Unit 2, and you got to review that. Okay? Higher interest rates increase the demand for the dollar.
Interest rates are good for banks.
I suppose.
It's higher.
Hmm. But to put your money in that bank, you got to demand the dollar. Okay? Well, let's look at this. Now, this makes our exports more or less expensive. More expensive, which means we're going to have fewer exports. We're going to increase our imports. So what happens to aggregate demand?
We make our imports less expensive because the dollar's strong.
Okay, y'all are totally confusing a couple things. So let me repeat, okay? I'm saying here that our exports become more expensive, therefore we'll have fewer exports. Okay? Our imports become more expensive or less expensive for us to buy, so we'll have more imports. The net effect is that we have less net exports, therefore we have less aggregate demand. Okay? So that's like our third complication. Okay? So the multiplier effect is lessened because of the crowding out effect and the negative net export effect. Okay?
Why does it mean? It looks like they cancel themselves out. Exports and imports. Why does exports?
They don't, because they're moving. No. This, traditionally, an export would create positive to our aggregate demand. So if there's fewer of these, you're getting less positive. This creates a negative to our aggregate demand, so if you're getting more of these, you're getting even more negative. Okay? All right, guys. Got to roll. So that's how, when we use expansionary fiscal policy, it's less effective than theory would suggest because higher interest rates cause there to be less investment, less consumption, and fewer exports. Okay? Then we have what's called contractionary fiscal policy. So now we have inflation. Okay? And if we're trying to cure the inflation problem, now we're going to reduce government spending or raise taxes. Okay? So the mechanics look the same, except in reverse. We're going to decrease government spending. Since the government spending is a component of aggregate demand, the aggregate demand curve is going to shift left. Okay? When it shifts left, now we're going to have less GDP, less employment, lower price level. Okay? Lower price level is the key, though, because that's what we were trying to fix. Or we could raise taxes. Okay? Raising taxes is going to decrease our disposable income. If we have less disposable income, we're not going to consume as much, so consumption falls. That's a component of aggregate demand. So that shifts the AD curve to the left, which does the exact same thing as the government spending did. Okay? Now we have the reverse happen. So now the government's borrowing less money, so you're going to end up with lower interest rates. Okay? So the demand for loanable funds shifts to the left. Now you have lower interest rates. Now it becomes more feasible to make investments. It becomes cheaper for us to buy cars and houses. And also our dollar will depreciate, which is going to make our exports less expensive. So while we're using the fiscal policy to reduce inflation, you've got the possibility that there's more consumption, more investment, and more exports that are counteracting your solution. Okay? Did y'all sort of follow that? Okay. So, whoops. I don't think we have to draw this again. The loanable funds market, I think we're okay there. Okay, it just works in reverse. Now you'll have less demand, which means you're going to have lower interest rates, which is going to increase investment, consumption, exports. All right, so we're going to determine if something the government does is expansionary or contractionary. So let's dissect this word expansionary. What do you think we're trying to do? Yeah, we're trying to expand the economy, okay? And then contractionary, we're going to try to make it smaller, okay? So if the government decreases personal and business income taxes and increases its own spending, expansionary, good, okay? If the government increases the personal income tax, social security tax, and business taxes, but leaves spending the same, okay, y'all are good. Okay, that's going to decrease GDP. Oh, I gave away that one, but if government spending goes up while taxes remain the same, you got it. How about this? The government reduces wages for its employees and raises taxes on consumers and businesses while leaving all other spending the same. Contractionary. Good. All right. So y'all can recognize things that the government does, how it affects the economy, right? Okay, cool. So, just recapping what we talked about, okay? Assuming that the government starts with a balanced budget. So let's say we take in $2 trillion every year and we spend $2 trillion every year. Okay, taxes and spending equal the same. Then a recession comes along, we would increase government spending, decrease taxes. Okay? In order to do that, you have to borrow the money. So whenever there's deficit spending, it leads to higher interest rates. So far, so good? Okay. So expansionary fiscal policy could lead to higher interest rates. That's something y'all need to be aware of. If we're trying to fight inflation, the exact opposite happens. So when we start at $2 trillion as our budget, now we're going to decrease spending to 1.8 and increase taxes to 2.2 as an example. Now we're borrowing less money, so we have surpluses. If there's surpluses, now interest rates are going to fall. Okay? Everybody get that? All right, some of y'all probably are thinking to yourself right now, but wait a minute, interest rates are at an all-time low even though the government borrowed something like $10 trillion in the last 6 years. So what's the answer, Corbin? The Fed. Okay? So the Fed has increased the money supply at the exact same time, keeping interest rates low. Okay? But assuming the Fed doesn't do something like that, this is what would happen. So there's a lot of what ifs. Okay? Are y'all okay there? Make sense? Okay. Let's move on. So at this point, I just want to double check. Can y'all diagnose problems in the economy? Can you prescribe solutions? Yeah, recession, increased spending. Okay. Further, are you able to explain the factors that make fiscal policy less effective than theory suggests? Okay, that's the part we need to still work on, Katie. So for this, we got to just remember we've got the crowding out effect. We've got negative net exports. Negative net exports. Those are all the result of higher interest rates, crowds out investment. Okay, higher interest rates from borrowing results in an appreciated dollar, makes our exports more expensive. Higher interest rates also crowds out consumption, makes cars and houses more expensive to buy. Okay. The reverse of this, by the way, could be called crowding in. So if the government doesn't borrow and they run surpluses, interest rates would fall, making it more feasible for businesses to borrow money and invest, more feasible for consumers to buy cars and houses, and then it would depreciate our dollar, making our exports go up. Okay. So back to this guy, the loanable funds market. So the demand is made up of the borrowers, the supply is made up of the lenders. When the government increases their spending, what has to happen on this graph? Demand goes up. Okay. So the demand has to increase. Now we look at the interest rate. Went from, in this example, 6 to 8%. Okay, that makes a big difference when you're trying to decide if you want to expand your business that's going to give you a 7% return. If the interest rate were 6, that would be feasible. If the interest rates are now 8, then you're not going to do it. Okay, so that's why it crowds out investment. Okay, are y'all cool with this? Remember, you got to be able to draw that. What would happen, as an example, let's go back for a second. What would happen if we as Americans, we start saving more money? Yeah, so now you'd have an increase in supply. Okay? That's going to end up reducing interest rates. What if we save less? We're spending more and more and more, and we're not saving any. Then this would go over here. So you got to understand all the different factors that will affect this market. Okay? More borrowing increases demand. More saving increases supply. All right. And then here I've got the two graphs side by side. Okay? Got the loanable funds market over here on the left. All right. So as things are right this second, according to this graph, interest rates are 3%. So at a 3% interest rate, businesses are going to demand $1.5 trillion worth of investment. Okay? When the government increases their borrowing, okay, the demand curve shifts to the right, interest rates go up to 5%, and now we demonstrate using this graph that the increase in the interest rate is going to reduce the amount of investment. So maybe it goes down to 1 trillion. Okay? Hey, Ashley. Yeah. All right, so wrapping it all up. Fiscal policy during a recession means you're going to increase government spending or reduce taxes or both. Okay? Fiscal policy during inflation is contractionary, so we're going to decrease government spending, raise taxes, or both. Yes, sir. Yeah, this is all Keynesian. Yeah, these are all short-run solutions. All right. Now we're going to learn that this happens all by itself. Okay? So let me draw something here. I'm going to use the aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph. Okay? Everybody should be able to recognize this. Okay? Got real GDP. Got the price level. Got our long-run aggregate supply curve. And let's make things simple. We're going to say that we have a $100 billion economy. So far, so good? Okay. Let's do some givens here. Let's pretend for a second that we have a 10% income tax. Okay? And let's also pretend that when we're at full employment equilibrium, we spend all of that on social programs. Everybody cool with that? Okay, so let's see. Government spends on, let's just say transfer payments. We'll call it that. Okay? So far, so good? All right. So real GDP is income, correct? So given where we are right this second, what are our taxes equal to? 10 billion. Everybody see where Corbin got that? Yep, 10% of that 100. Okay? So far, so good? And then when times are good like this, the government spends all of that on transfer payments. So what's our government spending? Also 10 billion. Cool. All right. So one thing y'all may not be aware of is that we have laws in this country that state that these transfer payments are going to be a certain number depending on an individual circumstance. Okay? So for example, if I lose my job, there's such a thing as unemployment benefits, right? Okay? And if I lose my job for a really long time and we're poor and I've got a bunch of kids, I'm going to get welfare, food stamps, rent assistance. Okay, I'm going to get all kinds of benefits from the government. Everybody agree with that? Okay. And the taxes are all based on income. So let's say we fall into a recession. And now our new income is only 80 billion. Okay? What's our new level of taxation? Okay? Now we're taxing at 8 billion. What's our new level of government spending? And by the way, you're not going to be able to give me a real number, but is it bigger or smaller than 10 billion? Oh, back it up. It's got to be bigger because you've got unemployment existing at 80. So the more unemployment there is, the more transfer payments there are going to be. So I'm going to just make up a number. I'm going to say it's 12. Are y'all okay with that? Okay. So automatically during a recession, what happens to government spending? And what happens to taxes automatically? All right. That's expansionary, right? So it's designed, or maybe it's accidentally designed, I don't know, but it's called an automatic stabilizer because automatically during times of a recession, taxes get lower, government spending goes higher. So automatically there's some mechanism that will help push this AD back to the right, okay? No, it's just, I'm just stating that whenever the economy is in equilibrium at full employment, then we're assuming taxes and spending are the same. Yeah, this is a recession. Let's do it. AD3. So now let's pretend this is 120. Okay? Our new level of taxes are what, Corbin? 12 bucks or 12 billion. And our government spending is going to be bigger or smaller than the 10. Now it's going to be smaller. So we could go with 8. just to make all our numbers make sense. Get that arrow. Okay? So automatically during this recession or this inflationary period, automatically we're going to have government spending smaller than taxes. Okay? And that's going to have a stabilizing effect on the economy as well. And during this recession, automatically we had government spending greater than taxes. So that's what we mean. We're going to refer to these things as automatic stabilizers. I just showed you how it works. Any questions on that? Huh? No. Let's talk more about them. Okay? All right. So guys, let's talk more about the automatic stabilizers. Okay? The existence of our current tax system helps us. Okay? Because we have what's known as a progressive income tax system, the more money you make, the greater your tax rate. So the greater the economy's doing, guess what happens to the tax rates that people pay? They go up, okay? Automatically. All right? On the other side, the spending side, we have all these transfer payments. So some examples. You got welfare checks, you got food stamps, unemployment checks, you got Social Security benefits. All of these things are going to increase during times of recession. The tax payments are automatically going to decrease in times of a recession. Okay? I guess we did sum it up with the last slide, but this kind of writes it down for you. Any questions, though? Okay. So what if we had a flat tax? Well, according to, this is all like Keynesian theory. So if we had a flat tax and we didn't have a progressive income tax, would it be as stabilizing as a progressive income tax is? It'd be less stabilizing, you're right. Okay. All right, are you all good to go then? All right, so now let's put some more labels on stuff, okay? When we deliberately use government stimulus and tax policy to help a recession or inflation, then that's called discretionary fiscal policy. Okay, we're deliberately doing something. You got to pass a law. President has to sign it. Okay, it has to be implemented. That would be discretionary fiscal policy. Then the automatic stabilizers, we also refer to those as non-discretionary fiscal policy. Okay, in this case, the Congress doesn't have to pass a law. President doesn't have to sign it. Nothing has to be implemented. All of these things automatically take effect. Okay. Are you all okay with this?
So, with the discretionary, is like absolute food and everything.
Yeah, so the stimulus package of 2009 was discretionary. Okay. Just the existence of unemployment benefits are non-discretionary. All right. Nope. Okay. Wait. These are all the same things that we just talked about. So. Oh, and I'm crossing this one out. I took it out of the last slide. But. Well, in a lot of times, corporations will, instead of investing their profits in bad times, they'll turn them back over as dividends. But I don't want to. I want to focus only on the government stuff. That's all. All right, can I go now? All right, cool. So the automatic stabilizers work just like this. Okay, the economy's in a recession. That means GDP has fallen. When GDP falls, tax collections are going to go up or down. Down. Okay, and transfer payments are going to go up or down. Up. Okay, so that's automatically occurring. That happens all by itself. Government spending will become bigger than taxes. Okay, and so that's expansionary. Deficit grows. What happens to interest rates then? As the deficit grows, okay, they'll go up. All right, then we got this. We got the inflationary gap. Real GDP has gotten bigger, right? When GDP gets bigger, what happens to tax collections? Okay, more people are wealthy, so you're going to have higher tax rates on them, plus more people have jobs, so you have more taxes in general. Okay? Transfer payments then are going to go down. And so now, instead of a deficit, you're going to have a surplus. Okay? And that's contractionary. Okay? except the interest rate effect on this is going to lower interest rates, which could be expansionary. All right, so I think we're in good shape. I want to go over one last thing.
And so, my
There we
fellow
go.
Americans, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you.
What's wrong with that? It is backwards. Good, you get a nickel. That's not what he said. He said the opposite. Okay, pass that back. All right, so John F. Kennedy, okay, he was, believe it or not, the inspiration for Ronald Reagan's tax cuts. Okay, so when Kennedy came into office, top marginal tax rate was 91%. That means the richest people in the country were paying 91% of their income, or at least their marginal income, in taxes. Can y'all imagine doing that? How many of y'all would work? Yes, sir? Which one? He's supposed to be just nodding, but the transfer from there to here gets everything all screwed up. So anyway, he dropped the top marginal tax rate to 52%. So now the richest people were paying 52% of their last dollar earned in income taxes. Today it's around 43%. It's marginal. So say, for example, let's say the first, I'm going to make this simple. Okay, the first $75,000 they earn, they pay, say, at 15%. And then the next $75,000 they earn is at a 28%. And then whatever they earn above, say, $250,000 is at the higher rate. Yeah. Okay, so their effective rate is different. So, yeah. The unemployment rate dropped from 6.7 to below 5%. Okay, the recession became a full employment, everything good, low inflation economy. That expansion lasted for almost 7 years, I guess, until 1969. Pretty cool. So, but that's also Keynesian, though. Okay, he said taxes or government spending. Okay. All right. So the last thing, I think this is my last thing. I just want to point out that Keynes's theory was not to always be spending tons and tons of money forever. Okay. Kind of like in our economy, we've had deficit spending for the last 40-something years. Okay, with a few exceptions. A couple years here and there, we would have balanced budgets. But for the most part, we had deficit spending forever. That's not what he said to do. He said whenever we're in this part of the business cycle, deficit spend. Okay? Then, whenever we move back into the expansion, don't deficit spend. Have a surplus. That way, over, say, a 10-year period, you have a balanced budget. Okay? During the bad times, you'd have a deficit, but then during the good times, you'd have a surplus. Okay? So he said balance the economy, not the budget. Make sense, guys? All right. So let's see what we can do here. This is the very last thing. I just want to make sure you all understand. What the heck? Where'd it go? This thing's supposed to be gone. How do I get rid of this? Well, you know what? We can do it without moving the words. If the unemployment rate is 12%, what do y'all want to do? Let's take it one at a time. Let's go with Allie. The unemployment rate is 12%. Do you want to increase or decrease aggregate demand? Increase. Okay. If you are going to increase aggregate demand, so let's just draw that arrow. What would you do with taxes? Raise them or lower them? Okay, good. Or what would you do with spending? Increase spending. Okay. What happens to the federal budget? Does it go to deficit or surplus? Okay, deficit. And does that increase or decrease the national debt? Good. All right, cool. Good job. That's nickel worthy because you identified the problem in the economy and you prescribed an action and then you described how your action works. You're a doctor of the economy. Addison. That's what she wants to happen. Okay, the objective for aggregate demand is that it will increase. Okay, get it back to equilibrium. So if there's 12% unemployment, that means that our ADAS looks like this. Well, that doesn't do a very good job. But let's say it's way over here. Okay, so she wants to boost it. Okay. Addison, you're next. Inflation is strong at a rate of 14% per year. Now you want to decrease aggregate demand. You could increase taxes to do it, good. Or you could decrease government spending. All we need here is we want to know how it affects the federal budget, deficit or surplus. Okay. And how does that affect the national debt? It goes down. Okay, cool. That's not bad. So see, over time, if you did this, will you pass that back? You would end up balancing the economy, not the budget. Okay. So you have surpluses one year, deficits another year. Cool. All right, Ashley Hanks. Surveys show that consumers are losing confidence in the economy, retail sales are weak, and business inventories are increasing rapidly. That's what did happen to do that, but so you want it to go back up, okay? That's your objective for aggregate demand. So tax policy, let's reduce taxes to do it, okay? Spending policy, raise spending. Effect on the federal budget. Now we got deficits, debt goes higher. Cool. Let me pass that back. Yeah, do y'all get that this is the policy she's prescribing, okay? She wants aggregate demand to increase, therefore she's going to decrease taxes or raise spending. Net effect is that it creates deficits. Those deficits add to the debt. Cool? All right. Jordan. Business sales and investment are expanding rapidly, and economists think strong inflation lies ahead. Let's decrease some aggregate demand. Got too much consuming going on out there. Okay, so how do we do that with taxes? Increase the taxes or spending, decrease the spending, or, and then how does that affect the budget? Surplus. How does that affect the debt? Decrease. Good job.